Coming up on this episode of Cade and Friends, Lee Williams has a long career in broadcasting.
Television
news.
We were exploring paranormal phenomena. Just say, hey, tell me about your screenplay. And they said, oh, how did you know I have a screenplay?
Travis Meyer at that point.
Yes, yeah. Most of the time I was there, we had Travis. And the owner of Griffin Communications on Channel 6 came to see him at his ranch in Glenpool. And I didn't really think until I was in my 40s that, you know what, I think I was a bully. You make these Navajo deities or spirit people.
And you went to uranium mines?
Yeah, I went down to uranium mine, one of the first stories I did.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Cade and Friends podcast. I am joined this time with Alex and Lee Williams. Hello.
Hello, Lee.
Hello.
Hello. Lee, first time on the show, of course. Lee, just so everyone knows, was our professor back at RSU. He taught a lot of our communications courses and everything, but he also has a long career in broadcasting, correct?
Yeah, television news.
Yeah. And I guess we'll just jump in. What got you first interested in broadcasting, in news?
No, it's interesting. I never have any family history of news at all. And I still don't know exactly how I made the decision, but I had looked at a TV production course. And I said, oh, that sounds cool. I think I'll take that as an elective. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't get in. And the professor who was the head of the department said, okay, I'll just sign you up for another course. And he put me in a speech course, interpretive speech. And I'd never had a speech course. I thought only sissies took speech courses, and the even bigger sissies took drama. And it's the only time in my life I ever let someone else make a decision for a course that I took in undergrad. So I took speech, and then I was good at it. You know, I did everything from Shakespeare to funny stuff, and people would laugh, and got a lot of reinforcement back. And then the next semester, I got the TV production course, and somewhere between the two, and Watergate was going on, and those guys, were the Watergate reporters were my heroes. Carl Woodward, I still read his books, and he's still around.
Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein.
Bernstein, Woodward and Bernstein. Mm-hmm. So, and All the President's Men, the movie about them starring Robert Redford. So I thought they were the coolest thing around. And somewhere in there, I thought, well, maybe I'd like to, I didn't think maybe I'd like to be a reporter. And just as flash, as quick as that, I started taking journalism classes.
So were you pursuing something else at that time, or were you just getting like those basic classes done?
No, I was a psychology major, but I cured myself and I got out. That joke always works. I don't know why.
So where was this at? Where'd you go to school?
University of North Texas in Denton, which is, Dallas, Fort Worth, and Denton, former triangle. Denton's at the top of it. And it's a bigger university, and now all that area has grown together. It used to have some.
Is that where you grew up, was in
Texas? Fort Worth.
Okay, Fort Worth. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. I was born at Carswell Air Force Base. My father was in the Air Force. And then we lived in Maine, and then Alaska, and then Lubbock, Texas, and then back to Fort Worth, all before I was 6 years old. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And that was military things, or what caused it?
Yeah, the moves were military, Air Force. Actually, they called it the Army Air Force then. And then they changed the name to Air Force, got its own branch. And so, that's how we got to Maine and Anchorage, Alaska, which I don't remember a whole lot about that, but I remember the yellow snow, and I think I may have eaten some because I thought it was cool. Yeah. And I remember the neighborhood bully taking my Davy Crockett rifle and beating it, smashing it with a hammer, and also throwing my favorite broom in the water and getting me to jump in the water so he could pretend like he saved me. And so it's funny, the things that you remember, but that's about all I remember from my Alaska days.
So when you were a kid in Alaska, you had a favorite broom.
Broom. I love my broom. Yeah. Well, I was only I was 3-4 years old,
Oh, wow. And so did you just played with the broom?
Yeah. I actually don't remember it, but everybody tells me I love the broom, and I hope I helped out around the house more than I messed things up, but I suspect I did not. Mm-hmm. But I guess I carried this broom all around, and this guy threw it in the water and then coaxed me in to jump in the water to get it. I mean, it's like a creek, and I guess I could have drowned. I don't know if it was 6 inches of water or 3 or 4 feet, but probably not over a couple of feet. And then he jumped in and saved me and was a hero till my father got out of me what actually happened. And
wow.
We weren't friends with him anymore.
Wow.
Not that I ever was.
Right.
Yeah, he was a mean little bastard.
Wow. A favorite broom.
Well, the bigger thing was smashing my Davy Crockett rifle.
Yes.
Everything back then was Davy Crockett. Mm-hmm. You have the coonskin cap and the rifle, which I guess had a early version of a plastic handle because it wasn't wood because it smashed real thoroughly. Yeah. And he smashed up my Davy Crockett rifle. And so...
Come on, it sounds like it's a good thing you got out of Alaska. Who knows what he would have done?
It'd be funny, to look up people like that and murder them with it.
I never suspected.
They'd have no idea what it was, and nobody would suspect you. Yeah. As long as you didn't take your cell phone.
Yeah. I always wonder, those people who grew up as bullies when they this kid. Do they remember doing this? Do they have any memories of that? And do they feel bad, mm-hmm. or did they kind of forget that they were like that? And where are they today?
It's a good question. He was a year or so older than I was, so he would probably remember it. Whether he feels bad or not, who knows? I guess it depends on the individual.
Yeah.
Most people grow a conscience as they get older.
Mm-hmm. People tend to forget, I think, probably minor things that they did, or what they would imagine to be minor in their life. Mm-hmm. I would say that he would forget about that just because it's easier for his conscience to forget.
Yeah, a lot of times we would forget things, mm-hmm. right? That didn't put us in a good light. But mm-hmm. I'm just the opposite. I remember all the shitty things I've done, and
Yeah, no.
I'm sorry for them to anybody I picked on. I'm sorry. I genuinely am.
I know I'm right there with. I remember I was usually bullied, and so if I had a chance to bully someone else and fit in, I would do that. And I remember there were a couple kids that got bullied more than I did, and I joined the other kids in bullying them in my elementary and middle school years. And then high school is really when I really started to kind of develop more of a conscience. And realize,
that's about where I did too. Oh, wow. I stopped fighting because I was kind of a bully. I never thought I was in elementary school, but I was almost a year older than most of the other students, and I was pretty big. Mm-hmm. So I like to wrestle. I looked at it as wrestling and having fun. The fact that the other kids were on the ground, I was standing up victorious, wasn't bullying at all. I didn't really think until I was in my 40s that, you know what, I think I was a bully. I didn't mean to be. I thought it was fun. Yeah. And sometimes other students, other people thought it was fun if they were kind of equally matched, mm-hmm. and we'd wrestle around. But a lot of
those smaller kids.
Yeah.
So if you were ever bullied by Lee Williams, he does feel bad.
So I got a story about that's meaningful, I think. So in elementary school, there were these two kids. You could tell they were poor. I was poor, but they were poorer. Mm-hmm. And one of them had a hearing aid. I think he had a hearing aid in both ears, but that's back when they would carry a battery was about the size of a cell phone in their pocket. Wow. And he was a scrawny, unpopular kid, and his brother was more popular. He could have been more popular if he had dumped his brother, but he was loyal to his brother. But we picked on, like you were saying, we picked on the kids who were less popular than we were, or not popular. He was very unpopular and ridiculed and teased all the time. So, I would think back then, wow, that was crappy. Well, one day I was working in this young men's clothing boutique when I was in college, and this guy came in, and I was going, "Oh man, God, I wish I hadn't bullied him." When he came in, and he was spouting all this Nazi hate the Jews kind of stuff.
Oh my! Wow.
And I thought, I did this to him. That's what I felt at the moment. Of course, it's me and a lot of other people, but maybe I created the hate in him that then he would find somebody he could look down on, which was the Jews, And I felt, boy, that I feel and still do feel terribly bad about about how I had teased him in elementary school because, that amount of ridicule has terrible effects on people. And here's one who found someone that he could look down on.
Yeah.
Wow.
You don't know the impacts. I mean, you're at a young age. You don't know sort of the impacts that you can have, or, you don't know if that's in particularly what caused it either.
No.
But it, at the same
Could have been
time,
his parents just as much.
Yeah, you don't know for sure, but we sure could have helped instead of hurt.
Yeah.
And you wondered if that had anything to do with him turning to such a, horrific philosophy.
Yeah.
And you look at the future, you go, well, I don't want to be part of that again. So.
And he was just doing that in the middle of a department store?
Yeah.
Wow.
Chesky in this young men's clothing store, and he was just spouting this stuff.
Wow.
Wow. See, I thought this story was going to go in a happy direction, and you were going to be like, "Oh, hey, I'm so sorry," and then that took a wild twist.
No, when we talk about the repercussions of what we do, good or bad, we have to come in some point in our life of being responsible and saying, I want to be kind instead of cruel, and that has meant more to me as the decades go by, which you guys don't have many decades yet, but I've had enough decades to think about, how good things turned out and how when I wasn't living up to my best self, how things turned out. And you definitely start regretting the bad things and celebrating the good things. Yeah.
And I could see that sort of thought process of you do have a lot of thought about, so with psychology, you said, is that this, what caused you to be interested in that initially?
Oh, I just think, how the human mind works is fascinating all by itself. So it would have been a natural thing for me to be interested in. And plus I didn't really know anything else. So I took a psychology class. I liked it. So I became a psychology major for a year and a half, something like that. And then I found communications and thought, hey, this is more fun.
Wow.
Yeah. And so immediately,
do I really like to listen to people's trouble that much anyway? Not really. I don't want to be a bad person, but I don't want to listen to that stuff all the time either. So
yeah, and they're looking at you to fix it too. Yeah,
I know. Yeah,
that's.
And they, the bad thing is they won't let you just tell them how to fix it. They want you to lead them to their own realization, because that's what matters. If people realize it themselves and then they fix themselves. That's a thing about psychology. And if I could have just told them what to do, then I would have stuck in with that. But nobody wants to hear me tell them what to do. So
you graduated with a communications degree, right? Is that what you did?
Yeah.
And then what did you do after that?
So I had, before I finished college, I was actually going to two colleges, going to community college in Fort Worth, because their Spanish program was a lot easier. And I had a couple of semesters of Spanish to knock out. North Texas was unbelievably difficult. They really prided themselves on their foreign language program, but it took up way too much time from my perspective. But so I was going to school there. I was going to school at University of North Texas. I was working in a young men's clothing store in North Fort Worth, and I had a part-time radio job in Gainesville, Texas, which is 30 miles north of Denton. So that'd be 60 miles north of Dallas. So I played a combination of middle of the road and country western late Saturday night. And that was my first radio job at a little radio station in a cow pasture. And then I got a job at another little radio station in a cow pasture in McKinney, Texas, which is just 30 miles north of Dallas. It's part of the Dallas Metro now. And it had a big music machine, and I'd put carts in the machine. You'd record the carts, put them in the machine. They had about 12 big music reels that played over and over. The owner was totally incompetent. He was starving to, he couldn't make enough money. In fact, my paycheck wasn't good. You go to the bank, and they look at the name on the check, and then they go to the back room and see if the money was there to cover it. And as often as not, it wasn't. He had taken him a couple more days to get the money in to cover the check. And then you vacuum the floors at night and left. And I had that job that was full time for about 6-7 months. And then I got my first real job as a reporter, TV reporter in Waco, Texas.
Yeah. Oh, wow. You were there for some time in Waco, right? Working in Waco?
Well, I was there relatively short the first time through, and I got a job in Albuquerque, which was a much better place and a much better job. And I was there for about six years in Albuquerque, 2 years in Albuquerque, 2 years in Santa Fe, 2 years back in Albuquerque. That was the best time of my life. It was so much fun.
And you're a reporter at that point?
Yeah, I started out as a photographer, videographer, actually filmographer, photographer. Well, we shot film at that time. And then I got to travel all over the state, all kinds of adventures, mysteries, in southern Colorado, eastern Arizona, Pueblo Indians, Navajo Indians, Santa Fe, jewelry makers. And it was a fantastic time because I could take that film camera, which was relatively small, and go down to uranium mines and go out and do stories about people, excavating the desert for a level of 65 million years ago when there were dinosaur bones literally on the surface of the desert. This really bizarre landscape. And
so you took photos at this point. You took
film.
It's film. Okay, so
movie, 16 millimeter motion film.
Mm-hmm. And you went to uranium mines?
I went down to uranium mine. One of the first stories I did. Down a shaft into a uranium mine. You have a little belt light. And
now does that cause any problems?
Yeah, is that is there like
toxic?
Toxic radiation or
there's an elevated level of radon gas. Yeah, so if you work down there for decades, you might get lung cancer. If you work down there for decades and smoke, then your chances of lung cancer. They said that if you work there, your chances of lung cancer are twice the norm. I always felt like it was more, but that's what the research said. But if you smoked and worked down there, it was 10 times.
Oh, wow.
10 times as high.
But just going down there as like a reporter, not really.
For a limited time, it wasn't supposed to be dangerous. I mean, there was radon gas in a lot of homes in New Mexico of some level. I mean, if it's high enough, you have to mitigate it. But yeah, there was radon gas down there, and it could be dangerous over time. Sure.
Oh, wow.
Sure.
And what was the story there? Was it just
just what uranium mining was like. So you'd see them. Man, it's dark down there.
When was this? What was the year?
This is 1977, probably.
1977.
So what? So would you have to bring lights in for all that, or?
Yeah, you had a big belt light, and it would put out quite a bit of light. You had to have quite a bit of light for the film.
Yeah.
So it was a good sized light with a big bulb, and it would blast a lot of light down there. And so then you shot the story and talked to people down there, and came back, ran the film, and cut a story that way. And it was not that different really than news now. Electronic news is more precise. It's probably faster to cut them, but the basic stories were really about the same back then. And
you also were saying you did some pieces on like Native Americans and stuff as well.
Yeah, jewelry makers, medicine men. Now this was on. I'd done an original story with a medicine man. I heard this medical doctor say that they were working with the medicine men on the Navajo reservation. I thought, wow, this is fascinating. I got to do a story about this. And so I did the one story, and then I got a chance to go back and travel with the medicine man. I tried to get my news director interested in it, and he wouldn't. He wasn't that interested. So I ended up going on my own and shooting it on stills. So that was the biggest adventure of my life. I traveled with a medicine man for a couple of weeks, and he let me sleep at his house. The first night I said, well, I'm going to go out to Canyon de Chelly, and this was a big national park, and sleep in the park because I didn't have any money. And I did, and I froze my ass off. And the next night he says, oh, we would let you stay here. Sorry, we didn't. So I slept on his couch for a couple of weeks and then traveled with him to these ceremonies, and he would make sand paintings on the ground. You've probably seen pictures of that kind of stuff by taking different kind of colors of sand and letting it come through the end of his hand and find streams. And he'd make these Navajo deities or spirit people. And it was quite intricate. And then the patient would come sit in the middle of the sand painting, and then he would sing. And the longest ceremonies were 8 nights and 9 days. It's called the Yebiche ceremony. So it's the memorization of it was incredible. He'd start singing about 10 and sing all night for for the patient, and people would come from all over the community, and kind of a well-wishing thing, and sit around and watch him sing for the patient. And it was quite healing, probably not for the medical reasons that we would think, but just everybody knows that with support of others, you feel better, you do better. And so it was very helpful to them. Whether there was any miraculous healing, I didn't see any, but I didn't hang around long enough to know, really. But I know that people felt a lot better, and they felt supported by their friends and community. And it was a beautiful thing, much like a church service. So anyway, that was the biggest adventure of my life.
And so would that have been your first kind of dive into, because what is that called? Because you did it by on yourself, so you were
like a solo, or is it? Yeah.
Oh yeah, one man band. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they call them MMJs now, multimedia journalist, or sometimes people still say one man band, whether it's a woman doing it or not.
Because this wasn't for your
one man band.
Job. This was. Were you saying it's like a
freelance? Yeah, was this your first freelance?
Oh no, that came decades later.
Oh okay.
No, that was just working for the TV station, mostly with a film camera, motion camera. But this Medicine Man story I did on my own in my own time with a still camera.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so you took your own time off.
Did that get turned into anything?
Yeah.
Did you turn that into?
Yeah, I got it published in New Mexico Magazine. Mm-hmm. I tried National Geographic, but breaking through to a big magazine like that is extremely hard. Mm-hmm. And usually they say, "Oh, we're thinking of doing the same story," and you go, "You sons of bitches! Why don't you just tell me if you don't want it, say so, but don't tell me you're not turning it down because you're going to do this." Yeah. And they're afraid of getting sued. So if they ever do a story on the Medicine Man, they're afraid I'll come out and sue them. So that's kind of a stock answer. We're thinking about doing the same movie about a ribbon and a sister and a brother. Yeah, we were thinking about doing that. That's funny. You should send me the script. Mm-hmm.
So you just took a couple weeks off and did this story yourself as a
right
as your own little.
Did you do other writing things like that, where you would write and take photos of, or did you?
I'm thinking. Mm-hmm. I don't think so. I researched a screenplay about, mainly I worked for the news organization and did stories.
Yeah.
So that was a form of writing for sure, daily on deadline. And then we got to do some news series that had more meat, like a documentary. Mm-hmm. So I did a lot of things. I did a story about Sikhs, the people in New Mexico anyway, they dress in all white and wear turbans, and I got really interested in them, and they teach yoga, and I got to be friends with a lot of them. So I did a series about them. I did a series about the state mental hospital and got really, ridiculous free reign of an insane asylum. They just said, "Okay, yeah, go do whatever you want to." And
was this in Texas?
This was in New Mexico. Yeah, it's when I worked in Santa Fe as the Capitol Bureau Chief, and Las Vegas, New Mexico, where the state mental hospital is only 30 miles further down the road. So yeah, they gave me permission to come in, do the stories, and pretty much carte blanche to walk around by ourselves and shoot whatever we wanted to. Now, today that would be impossible because of HIPAA rules and things like that. But I can really go, walk around and shoot the story. So we selected a few mental patients and profiled them.
And this was during your 2 years in Albuquerque, or?
Well, this would be after I was 76 to 78. I was in Albuquerque. 78 to 80, I was in Santa Fe. And then 80 to 82, I was back in Albuquerque. But this would have been the 78 to 80. When I was in Santa Fe, Las Vegas, New Mexico was close by, and the mental hospital. So that's when I did this series. And I discovered, I'm a long way is going to answer your question, Cade, about writing.
Yes.
So I did the story mainly focusing on two people. One of them was a woman named Fidelina Gallegos, and she had been committed to the state insane asylum when she was young, let's say 18, for nymphomania, okay? And the other guy, and in the story, the main character of the story was named Dwight Campbell, and he'd been committed when he was about 7 years old to the state mental hospital because he couldn't talk, and, actually he's a little older when he was committed, but he was just kind of, he couldn't talk. He's kind of out of control, goofy, and they put you in the mental hospital for anything. All they had to do was have the father say, put this person in the mental hospital, and the judge might order it. That's what happened to Felina Gallegos. So they both spent their entire lives there. And Dwight was still alive, so I did a story about him. And this nurse, psychological nurse, came to work there one day, and she saw Dwight. He was filthy, like 4, 6, 8 layers of clothes and dirty. And he would sit on the front steps and grunt and wave at people coming in. And so she got interested in him, and she tried to find out about him. And she couldn't communicate with him. And finally, out of frustration, she takes out her notepad and writes him a note and hands it to him, and he writes her back. And what had happened is he'd gone deaf when he was 6 years old. And that was all that was wrong with him. He had just gone deaf, and he ended up in the mental hospital. So that, I thought those were pretty dramatic stories. So later, a few years later, I went back and researched that for a screenplay. So this is coming back to the writing. And so I talked to everybody that I could, and I have video of Dwight, a story that I did on him, and I wrote a screenplay and been trying to sell it ever since. So I rewrote it about 5 years ago. It's a lot better now than it was, and so that's one of the things I'm going to do in retirement is try to make that connection. Chuck Price, who Cade and I know, who's a Hollywood art director and also is directing documentaries and reenactments in New Mexico, but he's worked worldwide for multi-million-dollar projects. He likes it. He thinks it's good. He thinks it's worth a go. So he's gonna help me on it, and we'll see where he gets. So after 40 years, my screenplay, maybe we'll produce a trailer for it and see if we could sell it.
Yeah. So what's the angle? Is it from his perspective, or is it from the? Well,
both of them. The story about what happened to them is true, and then I weave a fictional escape. You got to have some excitement in it. So they escape. So
it's the two of them.
Yeah, the two of them escape, and so you got to have a harrowing, chase of people trying to find them and eluding authorities, and that's the exciting part. That part's fictional, yes. but what happened to them is true.
Yeah. So, and then that's amazing that it's stuck with you for that long. That story
is, yeah. It's my burning ambition that I've never let go of, and why should I?
Yeah, it's a good story. Yeah, you don't let go of good stories; it sticks with you.
Yeah. So we'll see. I've got time to work it now, and just getting anybody to read it is almost impossible because everybody tries to get people to read their screenplays.
Yeah.
And so anybody who's in the business, just, they'll just run from you. And, you don't blame them because everybody tries to get them. Everybody's tried to break in. And I heard that an LA TV station did a story where they'd walk up to cab drivers and waitresses and just say, "Hey, tell me about your screenplay." And they said, "Oh, how did you know I have a screenplay?" And so the joke is everybody has a screenplay out there. Everybody's trying to break through, and there's only a few that are going to get through.
So, was there ever like a published story or anything about those two people?
No,
it was just
no, just mine, which is, I guess, is unpublished, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. So did that never? Did you never make videos out of those stories, or did?
I did. I made a TV series about those stories in 1979, and they aired on KOB TV. Yeah, and then I went back about 2-3 years later and did the research for the rest of it for the screenplay. Okay. So I quit. I left my job at KOB, which is really stupid because it was the height of that recession, Jimmy Carter and all that. Interest rates were like 18%. You think it's tough now with 8% interest. So it was hard getting back to work. I thought it'd be easy, but I was wrong.
So where were you at trying to find work? Still
by
there?
the time I was in Phoenix, and I traveled there with a wild woman, and was trying that. Suddenly found myself supporting both of us on my savings instead of just me and my savings. I had planned to do this. I'd planned to quit and research this screenplay, but I ended up meeting this woman who was promoting a gold property that a friend of mine owned. And he was a real hard rock mining family. He knew what he was doing. So I thought, well, I'll be part of that. So I wrote a mining prospectus, and I traveled with her for about a year. Ended up in Phoenix, where her house was, and then thought, well, I've been off work 6 months. I got to find a job. But it was a recession, right? A bad recession. And it took me 6 months to find actually, I sold solar equipment door to door. So I had job-like. Let's put it the way, I had things where I spent a whole lot of time and made almost no money, just enough to pay the most overdue bill. And finally, I was able to reconnect at a TV station and went to work as a producer. And I've always been a reporter or photographer reporter. That's all I ever wanted to be. But I ended up as a producer because I was a job open, and that changed my life and my career.
And was that in Arizona?
That was in Phoenix, yeah.
It was in Phoenix.
Yeah, so I became a producer, and then that sent my career on a management path.
So you studied in Texas, did some work there, then got right after college, got a job in New Mexico at that TV station, left that, and now you're in Arizona.
Yeah. Wow. Phoenix, got a job as a producer. So I'll tell you a really crazy story. So one of the things we were doing, we were exploring paranormal phenomena, and that was a part of it. Psychic phenomena, UFOs.
Would have been big in that region.
I was in a reporter. I did a story with Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who was the world's foremost UFO scientist. I also have a screenplay about him.
Oh,
and so he's a real guy. He was a very serious hard rock, hard sciences. He was an astrophysicist, but he lived in Dayton, Ohio when Project Blue Book was going, and that was based there, and they were looking for an astronomer to look at some of the data, some of the events, to see if there's an astronomical reason for it, like planets or moon reflection or things like this. So he took on that job, and that's how he got famous, as the astronomical consultant to Project Blue Book. So I met him doing a news series in Albuquerque. We traveled all over the state. And that's actually how I got my master's degree. I was thinking, well, I was going to do something completely different. And I was trying to relax outside the TV station. The parking lot had a little pond, and I'd go out there and sit because my 3-year-old daughter would make us crazy every morning trying to get her dressed and things. And we'd be all on edge. So I tried to relax before I went into work. And then the thought popped in my head, well, just do your master's project about Dr. J. Allen Hynek. And he's the person who coined the phrase Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Steven Spielberg paid him for that title. He has a cameo in the movie. He was the assistant director of the Smithsonian Astronomical operation in Washington, D.C., and when Sputnik went around the world, they were on the cover of Life magazine. So I tell you that so you know he was a really serious hard news scientist, not just a UFO investigator.
And you traveled with him.
Yeah, I traveled with him for a week and did stories all over New Mexico, and still have them. And so that's who I wrote my second screenplay about. It's a biography of Dr. J. Allen Hynek and some of his most celebrated UFO cases. And so we remained in contact for quite a few years. Of course, he was pretty old, so he timed out on me.
So what was he doing in New Mexico? Just like doing research there?
Well, I'm trying to think. So he was at KHJ-TV in Los Angeles, and my best friend was a promotion producer there. And he said he was going to Albuquerque for something. I know he had a friend there. I don't know why he went to Albuquerque, but he said, well, you should look up my friend there, Lee Williams. He's a reporter at KOB-TV.
Oh, wow. So you met him while you were still in New Mexico?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I went to Phoenix. Now I got back to New Mexico because I got to fill in this UFO screenplay. And so one day I was in there and I get a call from Dr. J. Allen Hynek, the famous Dr. J. Allen Hynek. And someone wanted to have dinner. And it just turned out that he hated to eat alone because he was in all these towns all the time and didn't know anybody. So that's when I asked him if he would want to do a series, and he said yes. And then he traveled back to New Mexico, and that's when we did this. That's when we did the series. He had a very good friend there. That's probably who he was visiting. But it's funny, I'd seen him years before at the University of New Mexico giving a lecture about UFOs. So it was after Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So he was famous on the talking circuit. He went all over the country. And I'd seen him, but I didn't meet him at that time. So that's how I got to know Dr. J. Allen Hynek. Wow. And that's how I did that news series, and then researched him and did the screenplay about that. And, so, Cade, I'll sell it to you for the insane asylum. I'll sell for $250,000, but the Hynek one I got to have $1 million.
Okay.
Wow.
So when you get famous,
yeah,
because Cade, I think, is going to get famous as a screenwriter.
Oh, I appreciate that. No, yeah, that does sound very interesting. I mean, you could almost do a he's a researcher with UFOs and everything, and of course very famous stories with the Warrens who did the Conjuring sort of investigation of things, and he's of course has done a lot of cool things, but with a science fiction element. It stretches the truth slightly, but I think it is somewhat interesting. And he's interesting guy. A lot of impact, and Project Blue Book, of course, very well known.
Yeah, he was quite a famous person. So I was honored for me to get to know him. I never expected that. I could do news series with famous people just because I was the news and I could put them on the news. Mm-hmm. But as far as becoming friends and having a longer multi-year relationship like that, was one of the most special things in my life. Yeah, it was great. It was great.
And so one of my things, so all this equipment and stuff, and whenever you're reporting and everything, my fear always with difference now versus then of like you would shoot on film and you would have to then look at it later, and it could be out of focus. There could be some problem that you can't immediately see what you're shooting. Right. And that causes perhaps some problems. I don't know if you ever shot anything and it's not good or not.
Well, I wouldn't say got fired, but I got in trouble before Albuquerque, I worked at a TV station in Waco, my first good job. And they had a camera called a Scoopic. And I kept shooting out of focus film, and I kept getting in trouble. And then, after I got in trouble 4, 5, 6 times for it, they said, "Oh, the Scoopics, they shoot out of focus. They notoriously shoot out of focus if you zoom in." I go, son of a bitch, why didn't you tell me that? Because I was, I didn't know what was wrong. What was wrong with me? But he knew it, but didn't tell me. Mm-hmm. And so that was that. Yeah, you didn't know. Mm-hmm. But as long as you have an eye that can see focus, you can stay in focus most of the time. Yeah. But they also pressured you not to shoot too much film because it was expensive. Yeah, so that's true. You had to shoot. They wanted you to shoot a 2-to-1 ratio, which means you only shoot twice as much film as you actually use. Now with video, it's not uncommon to shoot a 10-to-1 ratio because video doesn't cost any more the more you shoot. Yeah. But they really tried to keep the cost down by making sure you didn't shoot too much film. And so I was getting heat for shooting out of focus film, shooting too much film. I thought I needed to shoot more film because some of it was out of focus. And then finally, that Scoopic camera, it's everybody knows that thing shoots out of focus if you zoomed all the way in. Well, I didn't know that. Wow. So anyway.
That's frustrating, yeah.
So you couldn't see it.
With the master's degree, what is your master's in, and what made you when and where did you pursue that? Because it sounds like you had a kid at that point.
Yeah, boredom is what got me to pursue a master's degree. I didn't need one to be a news director, but I always thought eventually I'd want to, when I'm 83 or something, I might like to teach. But I always thought, no, news is too much fun. I don't want to do that. But I moved down from the mountains of Colorado. I was news director in Colorado Springs, and we lived up in the mountains. And living in New Mexico, Colorado, Arizona, I love the outdoors, the desert Southwest. So nothing's greater than that. So we would spend a lot of weekends out exploring the desert. And then when I got to central Illinois, first time I got to St. Louis was a big market, but I didn't like it there. So there's a news director job opening nearby in central Illinois. So I got that job, but there's corn and soybeans in all directions for 1,000 miles. So it was dreadfully boring to me, who like to be outdoor adventuresome type. So that's when I decided to go get a master's degree, because I wanted a spark of interest, something new in my life, and that really filled it. I took one course a semester for 6 years. Wow. And never thought I'd stay there long enough to get the master's degree, but as it turned out, we got trapped in Decatur, Illinois for 7 years, and I was able to finish all the coursework, and then I finished my master's project, a screenplay about Dr. J. Allen Hynek, here in Tulsa. I finished. Gotten the job as news director at KTUL in Tulsa, and I was working probably 60 hours a week the first few months. I'd work till like 9 o'clock every night. That's like 8 a.m. till 9 p.m. But on the weekends, I'd write that screenplay about Dr. J. Allen Hynek, and that's how I got my master's degree.
So, what is your master's degree in
communications?
Communications.
Yeah, just broad-based. There was a new media course. I would take whatever course was available nights, because the only time I could go would be in the evening. And so I just look, again, it's the only other time in my life I've let anything except my own thoughts about what would be best, or what I thought would be best, choose my courses for me, me. Remember the first time was when the teacher put me in a speech class I'd never been in. And this way I just totally went with fate. Whatever course was available at night is the one I took. So I took a new media course, which did me a lot. It really helped me prepare for teaching. And I took gender studies, which I never would have taken had it not been the only course available. And it ended up being a really great course. I really felt like I became much more enlightened by taking that course. And just a whole host of others. Research methods, which was not as hard as Dr. Avus's research methods. Our professor at Rogers State University, her course is harder than my master's course in research. And a variety of, I don't remember the other courses I took, but I ended up getting in the hours. And then just as I moved here, and as I said, I finished the screenplay. I did the screenplay here. Wow. And then I did a scholarly analysis of drama and how the screenplay, my screenplay matched the structure of drama. And that's how I got to do a master's project.
And what year was that you got your master's?
It would be 1998.
1998.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So so you do a lot of you've done 2 screenplays and everything. What drew you to screenplays in particular? Did you love movies? Did you? Oh yeah,
I always loved movies. Mm-hmm. But I've always wanted to write, but I've lived in a visual world. My stories were TV and movies. So I think it's natural that I would be drawn to write a movie if I were going to write, as opposed to a novel. Yeah. And so that was just always my orientation, and it occurred to me that I had some really good stories that might go far. So that's what I did. Yeah.
Yeah. What movies were you drawn to as a kid?
Well, the first one that comes to mind, of course, this is teenager. This would be high school.
Yeah.
2001, A Space Odyssey is the big one in high school. Of course, Woodstock, Easy Rider, all the big movies, especially more teen 20s, early 20s movies of the day. As a child, I remember Cat Ballou, which is one of Jane Fonda's early movies. You probably know who she is, because she was a very beautiful young actress. And Lee Marvin was one of the stars who most people don't know these days. Mm-hmm. He played in a lot of military and Western movies. Yeah. And he played a drunk. And he actually won an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, playing a drunk in that movie. Wow. But if you're talking about movies and Lawrence of Arabia, I remember that movie, even though I was a kid.
So Star Wars would have been coming out when you were...
And that was after college.
After college, yeah.
In Albuquerque.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would come out when I was in Albuquerque. Star Wars and E.T. were E.T. made a bigger impression on me than Star Wars did, for sure.
Wow.
And I remember seeing it free at the theater because we were in TV.
Wow.
We were at the TV station, and that was big.
Yeah.
So how do you end up in Oklahoma?
Oklahoma. Jobs. All my moves have been due to jobs. I was working in Decatur, as I mentioned, and that is not a glamorous place to live, although it was very good to us. It was really, they had a lot of stock options and things that helped us make a down payment on our house in Tulsa. And Tulsa is close to Fort Worth, which is my family home. My wife's from San Antonio, so we want to get back to our home area. The job opened up, and I was able to get it. Before that, I applied for a job in Oklahoma City. And I was very disappointed I didn't get it, but it was the weirdest thing. Sometimes you think fate is taking the wheel when you're trying to make a bad decision, and it's not going to let you make that bad decision, whether it's a God thing or just something knows something you don't. But I went to Oklahoma City and had an interview with the news director, and it was just one of the worst interviews I've ever had. Just everything, how sometimes you'll try to finish somebody's sentence to show rapport, and every time I do that, he goes, "No, that's not what I meant at all." and that happened about 3 times, and then I just said, "Man, you better shut up. This isn't working." And the weird thing, when he came and picked me up, I was at a restaurant bar kind of place, and when he looked across the room and saw me, his face, he just almost jumped. He almost startled, like, maybe I had a giant goiter or something on my neck, or looked like who the creatures in Lord of the Rings?
I think the orcs or
the orcs, yeah. Like maybe I was an orc. He literally looked stunned, blanched. He blanched like that. I went, wow, I've never had a reaction like this before. And then I went to the TV station and met one of the owners, happened to be there, and he had the same reaction. Oh. And I thought, what's the deal here? And, I had a beard, so I thought maybe they don't like beards. And I never did know. I just know that was not meant to happen for me. And that I really have felt like I was protected from not getting that job because it would have been a disaster. I didn't get along with the general manager in any way whatsoever. And it would have just been so bad. It would have just been so bad. And so I did get the job here in Tulsa, which is a much better place to live anyway. And that worked out really well for 8 years. That was the best station I ever worked for.
Yeah. You were news director there at KTUL, News Channel 8, for, you said 8 years, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that was, I don't know if I ever told you, I mean, that was the station I grew up watching and everything. Yeah. I mean, that was,
it was number one forever.
It was number one. And that was all those people there and everything. And we'd, as family, we'd watch that every night. It was the news program. And to know, you were behind that and everything, news director of that when I learned that going to RSU, that meant a lot because I saw that.
Thank you. Yeah.
My family
I was really proud of it. Yeah.
My family was a Channel 6 family.
Channel 6.
But, we would go to, flip between 2, 6, and 8, just whichever one was.
Well, you had Travis Meyer at that point.
Yes. Yeah. Most of the time I was there, we had Travis. And then
did
Channel 6 stole him away.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah, forever. He was there for 20 years.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. I did not know he was at Channel 8.
Yeah,
that's what he was. Yeah. And it's.
Then the owner of Griffin Communications on Channel 6 came to see him at his ranch in Glenpool. And
rest is history.
Wow, that was impressive, And then he pulled out an extra $100,000 and the rest was history.
Yeah, no, there was a lot of people. I mean, I remember, it was Carol Lambert, right?
Bob Howard is famous, and then Don Rhodes, the Dusty drawer. Yeah, people all the time as I work for Channel 8, and they tell me all those stories.
Yeah.
For our listeners, I guess it's good to preface that Travis Meyer is a well-known weather forecaster. He's
outside of Tulsa.
Yeah, he's by far the most popular and revered and trusted weather authority in the market, and that what that means is your station is going to be number one if you have the weather that people like the most, then your station's going to be number one.
He just has a charisma about him that's just amazing.
And Griffin invested a lot into their weather, like the systems that they have now and everything they show. Yeah, now it's pretty.
Yeah,
impressive.
they all do, but they invested in more in putting more money with Travis, and for as far as I'm concerned, he's worth every penny.
Yeah, yeah. And so you would, it'd be like evening news. Is that when you would go? You would be, or would you be there during the day? What was your hours?
Usually from about 8:30 till 6:30, 7, and so because you got to get the news rolling, you got to choose the stories for those newscasts in the anywhere from 4, 5, 6, and 10. So it's mainly a day job.
Yeah, and
then you go home, you have to watch the late news. And then you have to get up in the morning, watch morning news. So it's pretty much all consuming thing. At least my wife thought it was. She was glad when I left. Really, especially tornadoes would come and I'd say, "Bye, honey. People are going to die. Maybe us. Bye. I got to go to the station." So she kept her stiff upper lip, but she didn't like it.
So you had to go in for weather.
Tornadoes coming. I got to go. Bye.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Sure.
Were you part of any big major stories like the Joplin or the Waco
at Tulsa? Did you?
While at Tulsa,
Tulsa,
or even I guess at any of the in Illinois or anything.
Tulsa. I mean, there've been lots of giant weather stories here. Big tornadoes, the Moore tornado, and then the second time Moore got hit. So tornadoes mainly dominate our news. I can't immediately think of any other really gigantic story that would match the tornado coverage we had. In New Mexico, when I was the Santa Fe bureau chief, they had the state prison riot there, and that's the biggest story I'd say I've ever covered, because the prisoners rioted and they killed a bunch of the people they considered to be snitches. I can't remember. Jesus. I better not say a number of people that got killed, but it was quite a few. And they held the prison for 3 or 4 days before the authorities could get in and take control away from them. But it was considered the most savage prison riot in history. In some cases, they had blowtorches, and they took blowtorches to the snitches and tortured them and killed them, and all the networks were there, and we were just on for like, oh no, I can't remember how many days, 4 or 5 days with very little sleep. And it got to where I could just do stories without even writing them. I'd just talk them off the top of my head. And that was, I thought, my greatest reporting was in that. And no one recorded it. No one recorded most of our outside the cast, because we were live a lot for hours, and no one recorded it. And I always thought that was my ticket to Denver, which is where I always wanted to go. So I didn't get a recording of that, so I didn't get to Denver. So I became a news manager instead.
While you were,
so did you anchor? You anchored?
Some. Yeah. Nobody ever cheered for my anchoring. I was a little too stiff. I think I could have done it eventually, but I was the weekend anchor in Waco when I went back the second time, because I was actually hired to be the assistant news director and executive producer. But I was planning on going back on the air at that point. So I said, I really want to anchor the weekend. So the news director, who's my best friend, said, okay, but you got to work 7 days a week. So I said, okay. And I did for a whole year, but after a while you wear down. And I finally gave it up, and went entirely in the management direction, and soon after got the job in Colorado Springs as news director there, which is, of course, a fantastic place to live.
So how did you choose what news made it into that you guys were covering?
Well, you have a meeting every morning about 8, 9 o'clock, and you discuss all the available stories, and then you choose one. So you choose news. Of course, if you got big breaking news, that's a no-brainer. Otherwise, it's harder to make decisions. So you choose based mainly on what people are interested in. If it's a murder and you think that's it, there's way too much murder coverage in local news. But maybe it was a consumer story that was going to go up. Your price of gas is going up, price of electricity going up, and that was kind of a no-brainer too, because that affected everybody. And then it was harder after that. Then you had to decide on lesser stories. Maybe there's a controversy at the school district, or lots of things. But the news great news doesn't happen every day. You have to dig up the best story you can find. And that's where you value genuinely good reporters who can enterprise news. And there are not very many of them. Most people take the press releases and go out and cover a hospital cyber knife or whatever. That makes up a lot of news is what PR people feed us.
Yeah.
And that's legit up to a point, but you want people who can dig up real news, enterprise news, investigative news. And there's very little of that in television.
And that's a big thing in TV now is the amount of press releases and things that corporations essentially feed news organizations, right?
Yeah, since I've been in academia, I've seen some stats that maybe more than half of the news comes from a public relations source. Mm-hmm. It's easy. They want you to come. They put a nice shiny light on whatever their story is, and it's easy. I said that twice. But you got to fill that newscast, and you got a limited number of people, limited number of time. So yeah, we cover a lot of things that are put on by hospitals or I don't know the shopping mall, or if a new business comes to town, that's real news. But yeah, a lot of it is stuff that people want you to come out and cover whatever their event is, and you do.
When you were at Channel 8, then 9/11 would have happened. What was like your, I guess, because that obviously is probably the biggest.
Well, what do you do? It happened in New York. It's gripped the nation. You got to do sidebar, local angles of it. Well, what local angles? But you run out and you do stories about safety preparedness here. Anybody who knows anybody there, of course. We had a colonel who was killed at the Pentagon. And so we did a lot of stories about his family, but you also do, what are they? Those buildings look like the BOK Tower in Tulsa. As a matter of fact, they were designed by the same architect. So we did a story about that. And an embarrassing moment, we said, well, what are they doing over there? They evacuating? Someone said they're evacuating the BOK Tower because they're, the same kind of building. Yeah. A third the height, but still the same kind of building. So we called in. I can't remember what the first source was, but we called in to the security desk, and they said, we asked them, "Are you guys evacuating the building?" Says, "Yeah, we're evacuating." So I don't remember what the first source was, but that was our second source, and we went with it, and it wasn't true. They were not evacuating the building, so that was embarrassing. Then we had to go back on and say, "Well, they're not evacuating the BOK Tower." Usually, two sources, you can rely on the information, but not on that day. Yeah. So there's anything you can scratch up. It's really hard.
Did you guys send people out to New York? Because I know a lot of places did. Or did you guys
just took the network coverage, which was fine. If we'd sent crews, they would have been doing mostly the same story. They would look for local people, local angles, local companies maybe that were in that tower. Anything they could get, like the colonel who got killed.
Wow.
But it's very expensive to do that. So, big markets, you probably have Cleveland, Chicago, maybe St. Louis might have sent their own crews there. And
then you just rely on that.
Well, the network. We'd rely on whichever network it is to cover that story.
And then you would do your own stories on that end.
Yeah, local effects, local people, things like that. And things we could do here for a price we could afford. We really couldn't afford to go to New York for a week.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and that's got to be, talking about like the BOK Tower thing, that's got to be a huge fear of putting out information that isn't correct. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to do the best you can in breaking news because you don't know a lot. I can remember the Glenpool near Travis Meyer's ranch. They had a big oil tank catch on fire. A couple of them did, and so you could see the smoke from outside the city limits. And we were lucky that we had a city cam that we could point at it, but the smoke was coming up in the distance, but you could tell it was big. And so we decided to go live, and you put your anchors on the set without any information, and you send your live crews. They're headed out there, but they're not there yet. And you just set them down and tell them to talk. And luckily we had the one visual. And then it can be that you're ripping wire copy like the old days and giving them a piece of wire copy to read, before scripts can be generated. And then your producers start generating scripts for them to read. And it's, a lot of times it's very little, but they have to go live, stay live. Maybe you pull in the weather guy to say something about it. But you got to fill that time until you can ramp up the news organization to give you real content, if the story is giant. Yeah. And that one was. Yeah. So that's that's one of the most fun things you can do. And usually it's a major storm, a tornado in the area, and you might end up going live for hours.
Were you there when the bridge collapsed? Wasn't that one?
Yeah. That was big. I don't remember that we went continuous. I don't think we went continuous live on that, but that was a giant story for the tugboat hit the piers under the bridge, and the whole bridge on I-40 fell, or a big section of it. Cars were literally like a cartoon. They were going right off the end into the water, and quite a few people got killed before they got it shut down. So that was a big story. Yeah, and then we still have giant, in my freelance capacity of working for NBC, ABC, and the Weather Channel, I still get calls out. That's been great because I always wanted to be in the field anyway. I didn't really want to be a news manager.
Do you still freelance?
I still do, yeah. So my most recent job was Reservation Dogs, the premiere of the second season. A few months ago, I got a call from somebody to go out and produce that. And, basically you just keep everything straight, make sure you're getting all the interviews that they want and all the pieces and video that they want. You work with a local, a regional photographer who's hired like me, lives here, so they can get the stuff quick. And then I covered the Trump rally. Was that 2 years ago?
Yeah, 2020. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, so that was interesting. It was the first event, major political event.
That's
post
right.
COVID.
Yes,
And COVID wasn't over.
I remember that was big.
It's at the
big
BOK
news.
Center.
Yeah, that he would have that rally here.
Yeah,
and so I was out 3 days before the rally, getting interviews with the people who were camped in tents and stuff like that. And then they had all kinds of vendors with all kinds of glorifying Trump T-shirts and banners. And so we got video shot and we sent it to the network to use for their pre-coverage. Yeah. And
there was a disappointment. There wasn't as many people as they had
thought. Yeah. That's where TikTok users took up all the tickets.
Yes.
And they were expecting 18,000 people plus an overflow crowd of maybe another 8,000 outside.
Yeah.
And they rented the Cox Center over there as well. And they ended up getting 6,000 people.
Yeah.
Yes.
So part of that's because the TikTokers sabotaged it, but part of it is because people weren't insane. They didn't want to go get COVID.
Yes.
And so I wouldn't cover after the people arrived. I said I can't be here when they arrive. I'm not going to be elbow to elbow in a sea of humanity spewing COVID. So I left, but I told them I could only do two days.
Yeah.
The crew at the state, all of them got COVID.
Oh wow!
Oh wow!
Yeah, the whole NBC crew got COVID.
Well, that's the place that Herman Cain got COVID, and he passed away from it.
Well, they're not sure he got it there.
that's the theory. Yeah, you're right.
Well, no, he could have.
Yeah.
No, it was a very good chance he got it there, but he also was in other public places.
Yes.
Near that time, after that time, he could have gotten it somewhere else, but it sure didn't help to have him there without a mask, and and he could well have gotten it at that rally, and Trump would have killed his only black supporter until Kanye and who's the Georgia senator Herschel Walker, but that time he was his only black supporter. Yeah. I'm sure there were some others, but not a whole lot.
I remember during all that, my cousin, she was, I don't know, 16, but like she had, rented it or reserved a seat for herself. And she posted on her Snapchat social media and was like, hey friends, follow this link and reserve a seat. And I remember seeing that. I mean, I didn't do it. I was like, I'm not going to sign up for like a seat. It'd be okay. I didn't want to put all my information in. But my cousin did that, and I forgot that was a big story because it was
national news.
It
was the first
big time.
It was like you said, the first.
Well, I mean, whatever Trump did was going to be that, but it was the first big rally with lots of people at the same place in public, way too soon, and of course, almost no one masked.
Yeah.
I remember watching it, and I remember watching it. I didn't watch the rally fully, but I did watch some of it, and I remember just looking and like, the only people wearing masks were these camera people here and there, and I was like, wow.
And if I remember correctly, he had it scheduled on Juneteenth. Wasn't that the whole story there?
I think that's true. Yeah, and then had to move it.
Yeah,
then had to move it to the week before. I mean, it was June the 12th, if I remember right. Maybe it's June the 20th.
Yeah.
So anyway, but one of the students at RSU who his first name is David. He was a student worker.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
He got COVID, and he didn't get it from being there. His coworkers went there, and they came back to his workplace with COVID, and everybody in his workplace got COVID. Oh, wow. Or lots of people got COVID. Yeah. And so
he, I think used to call it super spreader event. That's what they called it.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The biggest story I've covered in recent years has been the big floods, and I never can remember the 2019. I think in 2019, the huge floods we had here, once in 100-year floods. Yeah. And I worked that story for a few days, and as a matter of fact, some of the video I think it was just after your time, Cade. We have video and we put them off onto all these servers in the Mac lab, and now students use that video to cut their own stories using video from that flood. So there's a horse rescue.
Oh wow!
And a bunch of other stories that I shot with my phone, and then I turned it into learning material for the students. And that was actually during COVID, and we did that remotely. But we'd download Google Drive, all this video of real flood stuff, and the students would make their own stories off of it. So that was a real advancement, I thought, in my teaching by not only talk about what I'd done, but putting my stuff in the hands of students to let them make the stories out of it. Yeah. And we continue to do that, and students do learn faster because when they see the video shot properly, they see it's organized properly into its own folders. It's all named. It's named, and they see how to put that video, how it's shot, and then it's easier to edit. It makes more sense when they edit the video that's properly shot, exactly. And they do learn faster. Yeah.
And you could talk a little bit about how much we've changed in like things are shot on cell phones now. A lot of journalists do. I mean, that is the videographers. I've seen them come to things and get B-roll that way.
Yeah, I've shot quite a few things for national news stories with my phone, and they integrate my video in with the video shot on cameras that cost $30,000 plus, with lenses that cost $15,000, $20,000, and you don't know the difference. If you blow it up onto a big screen, giant screen, you would be able to see some difference, but the color's good, focus is good, and it's amazing that you can do that with a stupid cell phone now. But it's good. You can shoot movies with cell phones, and I've been pushing that notion for quite a few years now at RSU, but it took me probably 3 years to believe it myself.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, and it's easier to just then to set up and focus and everything. I mean, like that right there. I mean, it shoots it flatter oftentimes, but that's what makes it easier to run and gun and get that recorded.
Yeah, it's enormously easier. And if you have no other camera than the one in your pocket, use the one in your pocket. Mm-hmm. And some of the color is beautiful. It's just, but the audio's bad. But
yes,
you have to get another microphone if you want decent audio. But the video is remarkably good. Mm-hmm. So it's everybody can. There's no excuse for not making a movie or going out and doing a story that you don't have the equipment, because with purchasing a $40 wired microphone and some lights, you can do amazing work.
Yeah.
Has there ever been a point in your career, like whether it's like doing a story or you were just getting like tired of it, that you ever regretted your decision or you thought about leaving? Because I don't know if like some people have like really, traumatic experiences, and then some people just get tired of what they're doing.
Like in news?
In news or in your career where you
honestly say I always loved news, but toward the end, there was one day, about a year before I got out of news, where I said, man, I've done this before. And I was a little disappointed when I realized, well, this is the I don't know, 30th time I've covered Christmas shopping, Black Friday. It was a story like that, and I was disappointed. It was the first time I ever remembered feeling disappointed about a news day. And maybe that was time for me to go. I don't know, because it was a change. It was a change of been there, done that I'd never really thought of before. But before that, news always seemed vital and important and exciting, and usually fun as well. So,
started feeling like you were kind of just retreading the same things that you had done. Yeah.
Yeah. Not everything, of course, but there are certain stories you do every year.
Yeah.
And I'd always done them every year and didn't care. But this year, on this particular year, I did care. Man, I've done this before. I do this every year. I don't think this is vital. I don't know if it was kind of like, I don't know if I want to do this again. That was the first time I'd ever experienced that, because I love news. It was a great career, great fun, very important thing to do. And maybe I was getting to the point where I wanted to do something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then you went to academia. Remember the master's degree that I got over 6 years back in corn and soybean for 1,000 miles land of central Illinois. Yeah, it came in handy because I needed the master's degree to get the job at RSU. I had to have it, and then it was the first time my grades ever counted. Nobody ever asked me what kind of grades did you make in college. Now I put something on the resume, but it never was really whether it got noticed or not. I mean, they cared that you had a degree, but it was the first time that my grades mattered, and I had to have the master's degree. So I was very fortunate that I got trapped in central Illinois for 7 years, and went and got a master's degree. Yeah. Yeah. And then you got the job at RSU, and you taught there. How long did you teach there? How long was it?
Let's see. I'm in next week will be my last week. 15 and a half years.
Wow.
And that's as long as I worked for KTUL and the previous job in central Illinois combined. Mm-hmm. And those were long stints. And most people don't stay in those jobs for that long. But so it's the longest that I've ever worked anywhere. And I just realized that here a couple of years ago. I went, oh, really? I've been here for 13 years or 14. Wow. So it certainly does not seem like it. For sure, it does not seem like it. If you're going to ask me, I'd probably say 8, maybe. but 15, that's 15 and a half. That's some time right there.
Yeah. That's it. And I mean, like, what do you like most about teaching? What are you going to miss? Yeah.
Well, you certainly miss a relationship with young people because you get to have the illusion that you're one of them, which of course is not true. But sometimes you forget it, and you think. But being in a young environment is very nice. Helping young people realize their potential is great. The students who won't work irritate you, but it's not so much the ones that won't work; they just won't turn in their assignments. Nothing ever comes in the proper way, But you say, here, put the stuff here, and then they'll put it there. And he goes, don't put it there, put it here. Like, oh, okay. And then the next time it's there. But stuff like that makes you crazy because it's frustrating and you have to do more work. But that's part of the deal, right? There are a lot of people who don't do great in their college years who will come back later and do really well. Or there are people who find other things. And then there are people who just, drop out the bottom and don't do anything that good. And everything in between. So but it's been very joyful to see students create. I've always been about creating great work, and to see students create something outstanding like your screenplay Ribbon, which Cade is the only student who ever did a feature-length movie at Rogers State. Now, we've had some short films since that have been good, but we got that program off the ground last year. But Cade's the only one who ever wrote and shot, produced, directed, edited a feature film. So when you see students do that, as a matter of fact, your year, I think, was our best ever senior capstone year, because we had 3 senior capstone projects. Yours, your Ribbon movie, you had Kenna Stimson and the movie about her grandmother passing from cancer. Yep. And going to Ireland to live the dream that her grandmother never got to. And then we also had Dakota Buckner that produced an original song and did the music video for it. And very good quality, a very good story, very good song. It sounds like Pink Floyd. I really like the music. And he didn't win an award. Mm-hmm. And so that was the hardest year for us to choose. You get 2 award winners. And you and Kenna got the awards, and I've always felt bad that Dakota did not. And in a normal year, he would have gotten the top award for that work. But they got it enough that we would choose 2. But anyway, I do think that was the best year we ever had, as far as a bunch of students creating something really wonderful. So good for you. Good for all 3 of you. It's very hard to choose. Uh-huh.
We've had Kenna on the show before. Her podcast, one of our favorite ones that we had, and we talked a lot about she does photography too, and she does an amazing job with photography and a lot of different things. And Dakota, we want on, but it's so difficult. He's out and all over.
He's a Marine.
He's
now,
Marine.
Yeah, that was a big surprise.
Makes it a bit harder to book someone when they're.
What rock god wants to be a Marine? But you never know what people are going to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And but when you see students turn out really great work, it is very gratifying, very exciting to know that you had something to do with that. But of course, students turning out that caliber of work have the inner fire and study hard and work hard to be able to do it. You don't create that kind of inner fire. You just hopefully show them some of the skills to make it better. And it's been a good run. It's what I always thought I wanted to do at the end of my last chapter of my career, and it's worked out for me. Although it's not the last chapter, though. I'm still. I say I'm going on. I'm not retiring. I'm going on to my 3rd career.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
maybe I'll make a movie.
Yeah.
So now screenwriting more, and I assume more freelance work is.
Yeah, freelance work. I had a couple of documentaries that I plan to do, and I still got that 2 screenplays out there. I will pitch to anybody who will listen to me. That really pisses them off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, if you're interested in Lee's, either of the 2 things that Lee has mentioned.
Okay, I've just marked down the Hynek screenplay by 50%. I'll sell it for $500,000 instead of $1 million.
You have to say that you've heard it here on the podcast.
But the first about the 2 people in the mental hospital, I got to have $250,000 for that. Okay, $222,000. That's my lowest dollar.
Final offer.
Yeah, which would probably get me about $10 an hour. Yeah.
So we'll reach you. We'll reach out to you if we hear anything from this podcast. Okay. Promo code podcast.
Yeah, you get a famous. If you get a famous director producer who's looking for people to pitch them screenplays, you let me know.
Yeah,
you never know who's listening.
Yeah, you never know.
Well, that's a great name for a. That is a great name for a podcast.
Yeah, you never know who's listening.
Or a movie.
Yeah,
or a movie. Yeah.
That is true. So, was there any other interesting interviews or people that you've met through your news career?
Oh, that's one of the great things about being in news. You get to go to such fascinating places and meet such interesting people. Some of them famous, some of them not. So I remember interviewing Jimmy Carter's mother, who was very famous because she was such a character. So the mother of President Jimmy Carter came through Santa Fe. And so she was there, and a bunch of reporters were around and got to ask her questions. So I thought that was really cool. I was kind of a smart ass. I always was embarrassed about trying to make a joke or something, which I would do too often. And usually my jokes land, but sometimes if they don't, they squat. Yes, I'm trying to think who else.
Did a joke not go too well with?
No, she thought I was being a little curt and rude. I was trying to be clever, but she didn't think it was so clever. And she didn't say anything, but she was, like grandma look. But I got to interview a lot of senators and governors, and I was in the Capitol Bureau Chief in Santa Fe. I saw the governor every week, and I think he had a news conference every week, and so that was cool.
Maybe Jimmy Carter's mother talks to Jimmy Carter about this interview report question. We could ask him.
We could ask him. He's still around.
Yeah. Maybe she said something. Yeah.
But you got to see Olympic skaters and movie stars. Oh, I talked to Jane Fonda once. It was a big art auction, and they had like some famous artists who donated their works. It was a school for the deaf. And R.C. Gorman had donated, he was a very famous Native American painter, had donated one of his early works. And I found myself sitting next to Jane Fonda, who was a supporter there. Mm-hmm. And I turned to her and I asked her a question. I don't remember what it was. I was so nervous I was about to shake out of my shoes, literally. And I asked her a question, and she turned around to me and answered my question. And all I could think about, Jane Fonda's talking to me. Jane Fonda's talking to me. Jane Fonda's talking to me. Jane Fonda. And I have no idea what she said then or since. And then she stopped, and I was just staring at her, and she looked at me, and then she finally turned around back and talked to somebody else. But there was my opportunity to marry Jane Fonda.
When was that roughly?
About 78, 79 when I was in Santa Fe. Yeah. A lot of cool people. Chuck Jones, the Bugs Bunny cartoon director, came through. I got to interview him. Robert Weiss, who was a very famous director. They had a Santa Fe Film Festival there, and he directed the first Star Trek movie.
Oh, yeah.
And so I got to interview him, mm-hmm. And smart ass that I wasn't being a smart ass. I was because I loved Star Trek, and so I started to tell him what was wrong with it. and later I thought, you arrogant turd. You should have. That wasn't. And he was hurt by it. He was because I'm sure he'd heard some of the same things from others. Because it wasn't a real celebrated movie because it was too cold and clinical. It had been a really good second movie. Yeah. But people wanted to see the camaraderie of all the characters, and you just didn't get it out of that movie. But it was it was dry, as cold. Yeah. They tried to borrow a lot, I think, from 2001.
Maybe they did,
yeah. But seeing it again later, I thought it was a really good movie. It just wasn't the movie people wanted to see at that time.
There's a new version, like a producer's cut or something of that movie that's like longer, and people have said it's better. And
I'd like to see it.
Yeah, it just came out like a year ago or something.
Yeah, I enjoy seeing it. Yeah,
yeah, it's that was. I guess a lot what people have said. They say I love the original Star Trek. So they were what a lot of that was taken from is they took the sets and some of the ideas from. They were going to do a TV show reboot of the original the original series. Okay. And it was going to be called Phase 2. It was going to be Star Trek Phase 2, and they instead. Paramount or whoever said that they should make that a movie. I think with 2001, all the sci-fi movies, they're like, well, let's put some actual money into this and make it into
a feature film.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that's what ended up sort of happening, and they took different ideas, and that's how it ended up. And
okay, good to know.
Are you still a Star Trek fan?
Oh, yeah. What was the second movie? Was the second movie The Search for Spock or The Genesis Planet?
That was Wrath of Khan, the second movie.
Wrath of Khan, which was more pop. That's more what people were looking for from the first one, and they were smarting off to each other. Mm-hmm. And then the one about the regrowing Spock, I did not like.
Yes.
I enjoyed the overall movie because I'm too big a Star Trek fan not to, but I went... Yes. man, don't regrow Spock. You know, he's just not going to be all. He's just not going to have all the knowledge he did before you regrew him.
Yeah.
from a mushroom or whatever that was.
They have they say the even amounts of the even movies of Star Trek are the better ones. That's what they used to say before the new ones. So like second Wrath of Khan, and then Voyage Home was like the whales. It's actually kind of good. I
loved it. Yeah. But it was pop. It was very popular. Yes. Yeah.
I never watched the original series, but I am a very big Star Trek fan.
Yeah.
I personally love Deep Space Nine.
Okay. And he likes Next Gen as well.
Next Generation.
I like Next Generation.
But I find myself, and I haven't watched like the newest ones because I'm rewatching Deep Space Nine, and then I'm going to go into Picard. But Deep Space Nine has just been my favorite Star Trek.
Okay. Yeah, it was a darker take.
Darker take,
but Ferengis and
the Cardassians and the Bajorans. But I loved it. It just took place on a space station, but it just I think it's the characters. All the actors and characters, it's all phenomenal. Like if I could go in time and watch like a set or something or meet people, like those would be the people.
Okay, very cool.
Deep Space Nine, Cade and I are Star Trek fans.
I'm always the original. I love the original Star Trek. I like the sort of campiness and the how it's all seem like held together by strings.
Almost. Yeah. But still, I like it. I
love it.
I can watch it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in the movie, the original movies, those are Wrath of Khan, Voyage Home.
I've liked all the Star Trek movies. Like I said, the one with Spock getting crashing and getting regrown. I thought it was too stupid. I just couldn't go there. But like I said, I didn't mind it. But all the rest I've liked, and I've liked the newest generation of Star Trek movies. Although the last one, I thought, wow, isn't this the same movie we just saw? I thought it was just too similar to the one that was just before it. But I like the new Spock and Kirk through the first two movies.
Yeah.
Very good reboot.
Yeah. Well, do you have any advice that you would give to people that wanting to have a career in news? What would that be?
Well, you got to really want to do it, especially these days with so many negative thoughts about it, which I think are unfair. The way media and news have been criticized and satanized, and it's kind of, I think it's kind of like Dr. Fauci getting so demonized and criticized for trying to save lives. So I think a lot of similar things have happened with news, with all the criticism. And news is still a very honorable profession. The cases of people, making up stories are phenomenally small. And if that happens, people are drummed out of the business for life. If you make too many mistakes, you get fired, and you don't get to take sides. And especially local news, but it's all been demonized. When I go up and talk to people now about, hey, would you do an interview with me? They say, which news organization's for? No, we don't talk to you. And I go, wow, that never used to happen. Never. It's horrible that news has been brushed with the idea of fake news because overwhelmingly that's a lie. It is a lie, period. When the mistakes happen, they're corrected, and that's what news still is, mostly. So if you want to get into it, you got to really want to. You got to put up with low pay for your first station or two, but then, pay can get pretty good after that. So if you really like it, you like that kind of life, then study your English and then your news writing, photography, producing, all those skills. And if you continue to like it, then there's quite a few jobs, especially as producers out there. They need producers because it's such a responsible job. It's kind of like a mini news director. You're in charge of your own show, and you can get hired without very much experience and go far fast. So it's for me, it's been the greatest life. It's been a very adventuresome life, and I've gotten to see so many amazing things in all the states I've lived in that I can't recommend it highly enough.
Yeah. Do you find it troubling the amount of there's not a lot of different companies out there? They're almost all consolidated. There's only a few handful of companies that own a lot of these news organizations.
Yeah, that's a problem. I don't know. At the local level, I don't know how big a problem it is. Sometimes you have some really lousy local owners, but cheap. And now some of the companies that have gobbled up so many stations, they just try to keep salaries so low and operations so cheap, maximize profit. But people have always tried to maximize profit. The people who own the stations don't, they're pleased if you may win awards, but they're there to make money, and the more money you make, the more successful you are. But the consolidation, it worries you that it's going to be even more detached from the local community, more bottom line, fewer people hired, fewer experienced people that get paid the kind of wage that a highly experienced reporter, a true investigative journalist would get paid. You can't get them right out of college. It takes years to build that kind of experience. Mm-hmm. So the run and gun nature is worse now than it was, and it was already bad. It was always bad to do quick, easy grab stories like explosions and murders and weather events, and that's always been true. But I would say the quality of stories day in, day out in Tulsa and pretty much across the nation have got to be less, because people are feeding more news outlets, and the storytelling quality has gone down.
And you think it's because of the quantity? What would be the reason for that?
A lot of it's quantity. You put on another newscast. Now people have 3 hours in the morning. At 11 or 12, they'll come back in at 4. They go through 5, 6, and sometimes later. There's lots, and then they have a 9 o'clock and a 10 o'clock, and they don't hire enough producers. They'll hire a producer for that show, but they don't hire an equivalent amount of reporters and other support staff, and they just try to get by with less and less local people, or maybe a little more staff and a lot more news to fill. And so that means they have to take things from public relations agencies. They have to take things from the national feeds and networks and less locally created news. And maybe as bigger a problem is there just aren't hardly any investigative journalists in local news. People digging up real stories, real enterprise news, uncovering news, catching bad guys. There's too many running around with a press release in their hand, and it might be a good story, but it's not real journalism. And we need a lot more of that. We've always needed a lot more of that, and it's gotten worse.
Mm-hmm. And you think the reason for that is the journalism's fault, or the journalists, that there's not those journalists?
I think more news to fill, more slots to fill, less time, more work that has to be done. So one of the stations in Tulsa we're having people go out and do 2 full news packages a day that not only did the packages, but they also edited them in the field on their laptop, set up their own live shot, did them, and then went and did the next story. Well, when you're moving that fast, you can't get depth, and you can't cover both sides, and the quality of those stories are going to suffer just by the quantity of work that has to be done. Yeah. So I see a lot of stories that are just very shallow, terribly shallow on all the stations, and that's a big concern. Used to, if you were going to do a news package, you had to cover both sides. You paid attention to the quality of the story, the quality of the visuals, to the degree you could. You still had a deadline, right? But the people who got good at it could do sometimes a really good piece, and had contacts, could do a really meaningful story. Sometimes, maybe once a month, maybe twice a year. And now they're just, they'll run out and get a little video, they get one soundbite, they read it real fast in the newsroom or wherever they are, and it's just got no teeth or depth to it at all. Yeah. And that's a great disappointment to me.
Yeah.
This is a question we like to ask. Usually it's Cade, but I'm going to take it this time.
Sure.
If you could say something to your younger self, what would you tell them? Would it be career related or just life related?
Yeah, that's great. You mean about? Well, you gave me two questions: career.
Yeah,
or
it
life.
Could be
career or life.
Yeah, it
maybe
could
I
be,
can get to.
I mean, you can give
both those.
Yeah, both of them if you want.
So career, I think it would be to work harder. And I worked hard, worked a lot of hours, but I think there's some things I could have done that would have enhanced my career, including performance. I finally got the voice that I thought was a good broadcast voice after I got into management, just because I talked to people all day long. And then maybe some more. I was an investigative journalist, so that's pretty, and a Capitol Bureau chief, so that's pretty good as far as real news chops. So maybe working another level harder to try to do, even more profound news. Maybe why not get in the competition for a Pulitzer Prize or really try to do something of that kind of scope and depth. You seem like, well, there's never be time for that with all the other work you're doing. You're already doing 50 hours a week plus. But that's how the great journalists do it. They find the time to do that quality pieces till they get to some place where they can do something truly remarkable. And some of them do it at small markets like Tulsa or Waco. They just work that hard. So I probably would have liked to found something and tried to do something truly outstanding. So that's probably my thought as far as my own career.
But for your personal life.
Yeah. Well, I've always thought, going back to remember the guy that I made fun of with the hearing aid, I would say, it actually is my last words to students just this past week was that there are going to be, downtimes in your life. There are going to be uptimes and downtimes. You can't avoid the downtimes. Just try to work through them the best you can, and to mitigate the depression or anxiety or failure or whatever, and try to mitigate that. So you try to work through it where it doesn't hurt you so bad. And the main thing is to be kind to others and to be kind to yourselves. So that's was my closing words for my teaching career, and that's what I come back to at your question.
Wow. No, that's awesome.
Well, yeah, I think that sounds like a good closing in general, don't you?
Yeah, I was going to say,
good closer for a 50-year career. Huh?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, that I love talking to you, Lee. I enjoyed having you as a professor. I really did.
Too.
You were a
Thank
great,
you both. That's very nice.
You were a great mentor. I loved hearing you talk, and I mean, first class we took was Intro to Mass Communications with you, and that's first course for a lot of people.
I remember it very well.
Yeah, and then I took video with you and everything, and of course Capstone and everything, and
you were
reporting.
You were a big supporter of Ribbon.
Yes,
a very early big supporter of that. I mean, we sat in your office and watched Ribbon, the one cut of
the first cut,
the first cut of Ribbon.
Yeah, I remember that now that you say it. Yeah,
yeah. You just had us come in and sit down and watch it, and you were always a big supporter of that, and so I think we both really appreciated that because. It was a big project.
We both have a lot of talent. Like I said, you're one of the few, along with Hannah Gray, that I wish the three of you would get in a car together and go to Hollywood and really try it. And I don't think I've said that to anybody else.
Hannah does make appearances on the show sometimes.
Yeah.
So we're, maybe not in Hollywood, but we're together in Tulsa every now and then.
Yeah. But two actors and the director.
Well, Lee, like I
Thank
said,
you.
I enjoyed your teaching. I enjoyed your wisdom and everything that you impart and everything. Yeah, and I really do appreciate your support that you've had of us and everything. I don't know. You have any other nice words to say to Lee?
No, that's all
Boy, yeah, and it's even on the record here. Now I can have my kids listen to it. I don't know what you're going to get here.
That's the real reason Cade's saying all this is so you'll plug the podcast.
Plug the podcast to everybody.
My vast Facebook network.
But no, I really enjoyed you. I really enjoyed my time at RSU. I'm obviously not pursuing that anymore, but it led me to meet some amazing people, and I have only fond memories of RSU, and I had a really good time in the various classes. And I carry a lot of the lessons with me that I've learned from students and professors alike, and like Cade said, it was a really good time, and I'm sad to see you're retired, but we also, Cade and I, when we saw you were retiring, we're like, let's grab Lee.
We'll make a movie.
Yeah.
Come invite me back after my my movie is done.
Exactly.
After you get the $500,000 deal,
will you come onto our podcast after you get the $500,000 deal?
I will.
All right. We have that on record.
Well, I mean, are you excited about retirement, Lee?
I am.
Okay.
I am. It's mixed. It's mixed, and I never really thought about wanting to retire because it always seemed like quitting and going out and doing nothing and sitting, and that never appealed to me. So I decided to retire, but to do more things.
Yeah,
I'm excited to see what you do.
Yeah,
I follow. We're friends on Facebook, so I look forward to seeing updates on that. And so
good. Hold me to my word.
Yeah, we have it on video and audio record.
Well, thank you for joining us,
Thank you, Lee.
It's been great. Very fun.
So, when you were a kid in Alaska, you had a favorite broom.
Broom. I love my broom. Yeah.